Good to be with you again. Our opening picture today happens to be from Yellowstone. This is one of those great mineral mounds built up, and if you look at that carefully, you can see some of the steam coming out of the rocks. This is late August, early September. You kind of get those fabulous thunderstorms coming through Yellowstone. Very beautiful. Thank you, Sherry, so much. That's amazing to see the science that goes on and the geology that happens there in Yellowstone. Is quite fascinating. Hope you enjoy it. So we are in the book of Daniel. We are looking at chapter 8. This is the fourth part of our series. Now, remember, Daniel's name is God is my judge. And the wonderful thing about this is that it just speaks to the greatness of God. And so as you listen to the stories and the kingdoms and the things that are happening to Daniel and around his life, understand that God is in control. And he's a God of vindication. He is a God of justice. He's a God of redemption. So I said Daniel's name means God is my judge. It's the theme of the entire book, all the way through, every story in it. It is a revelation of the future of God's providence, his vindication of his people, the opportunities given to kings and kingdoms to make a difference. It is God who sets up kingdoms and takes them down. And I just hope you take a really deep breath and understand that, you know, when it comes to Christians and politics, we can just take a deep breath and say, praise the Lord, God knows what is going on this planet. And the book of Daniel verifies and proves that every time you read it. All right, so when we looked at Daniel 7 was like a series of pictures, like photographs. You're given a description of each creature, multiple wings, extra ribs, the bear is in a posed position, the leopard had heads, 4 heads on it. It's almost like you can see each picture, and the only action in chapter 7 is the uprooting of the 4 horns and the horn that comes up and speaks blasphemy. Now, when we come to Daniel 8 is like an action film. Okay, it's really got some intense moments in it. I hope you see them. I hope you hear them. And they're now a living dynamic. So here it is, the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar. A vision appeared to me, Daniel, and after the one that appeared to me the first time, I saw in the vision. And so it happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. So you know right where he was standing, and he lifts up his eyes and saw. And there standing beside the river was a ram that had 2 horns, and 2 horns were high. But one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. So he has seen these horns grow. Now, you know, in book of Revelation and in Daniel, those horns represent authorities and powers. We have the Medes and the Persians that this ram is representing here. Okay? And so pay careful attention as the story unfolds. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any who could deliver from his hand, and he did according to his will and became great. So this ram is moving its forces, its military, if you would, in all the directions of the compass. Okay? Pushing westward, northward, and southward. No one could stand up against him. And he could do whatever he wanted. He had such great power and authority. Now, I'm going to read verse 8, but there's a note on the top of the screen we'll come back to. This is verse 6. And I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns, which means he has now broken the power of the Medes and the Persians. So this male goat seems to fly over the surface of the earth. We've met this creature before as a multi-winged leopard, which is also very fast and very fierce. And now it attacks and it utterly defeats the ram. and that would be the Greek Empire. Now, look at verse 7. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. So Alexander the Great would be the conquering general of the Greek army, and all I can tell you there is that that is a perfect historical description of the power of the Greek Empire. It says, therefore, the male goat grew very great, but when it became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it, 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds. Now keep in mind, the leopard had 4 heads. Now we have these 4 horns, these 4 powers. That would be the 4 generals of the Greek Empire. And out of one of them, I need to back up. I need to read this to you very carefully because there's a point I want to make. In the place of 4 horns came up toward the 4 winds of heaven. So now it says, and out of them. See that word them? So the question is, when it talks about this little horn, is it coming out of the 4 horns or is it coming out of the 4 winds? Came a little horn which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the glorious land. Now I'm just going to tell you something that's really important here. It's the 4 winds that the little horn comes out of. And we know that because in the Hebrew language of this passage of Daniel, which is written, by the way, in Hebrew, that the linguistic study connects you with the absolutely correct gender, and the plurals match perfectly the 4 winds. They do not match the 4 horns. So understand this little horn is coming out of the 4 winds and grow exceedingly great towards the south, east, and the glorious land. Now let's go to verse 10. And it grew up out of the host of heaven. I'm sorry, I want to read that again. And it grew up to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. Now take a deep breath. Understand that this little horn power, we met it before, this little horn power comes out of a incredibly strong nation, and now it is moving heavenward to the heavenly realm and attempting to bring down the heavenly realm of God's sanctuary down to earth. Okay? We'll study this more in the second half of chapter 8. So on the next slide, what I have for you is I have a little schematic. It's very simple. If we look in the upper left corner, this is Daniel chapter 8, what he hears and what he sees. So everything above the green line is heaven. Everything below it is what happens on earth. So he sees the ram, he sees the he-goat, he sees the little horn come onto the world scene, and he's seeing this, and then he sees the vertical ascent of the little horn that has religious passions. And that little horn has religious implications in its political realm. That is what's happening on the heavenly. When we pick up the second part of chapter 8, Daniel does not see from verses 13 and 14 on, he's hearing. So what we did today is we looked at what Daniel sees in the earthly vision, and he sees this little horn wax great and now reach to the heavens to attempt to bring heaven down to earth and to defeat, if you would, God and make God in his own image. So I also have another graphic for you. It's Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8. So if we start in the upper left corner in the gold with Babylon, the head of gold, the winged lion, I want you to notice in Daniel 8, there's nothing to parallel that. But when we get to the Medes and the Persian, the bear, which was the silver chest of the statue Daniel saw, we have now that same story told as a ram with 2 great horns that expanded and became unstoppable, conquering the world. Then followed by that, according to the interpretation God gave to Daniel, we have the rise of Greece, the Greek Empire, brass thighs, a winged leopard. Now the story is told as a male goat with a great horn, great speed, defeats the ram, breaks the horn, and 4 horns arise, which would be his 4 generals that divided the kingdom among themselves after his death. And they 4 horns arise towards those 4 winds. Out of the 4 winds, in that big red square, under the Roman pagan empire, it was a monster, multiple horns. There were 10, the rise of the little horn. We have Rome, the 10 toes at the bottom, which is the division of the Roman kingdom into all the 10 empires, and and then it's iron and clay, which is a highly unstable world that we live in today. And then in that maroon square it says, from the four winds a little horn grows. It reaches up to the host of heaven, and it casts it down. So it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. He exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifices were taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So I'm going to stop here, because in Daniel 8 it doesn't take you down to the stone mountain and the great mountain that is established as God's permanent kingdom here on earth. It just takes that one section and just gives you a deeper story about the Medes, the Persians, the Greeks, and something happening in the Roman Empire. And in Daniel 8, it's all about that little horn, which we will talk about the next time we get together. So, closing picture, and I sometimes get a little reminder from Sherry that I skipped it. Again, here's another one of those vents where the earth is just breathing steam just coming right up out of the earth. That's just a spectacular place, so I want to thank Sherry again for her great work and her photographs. We're going to pick up chapter 8, part 2, but there's so much in this, I needed to break it up into simple sections for you. So, we'll see you again next time. Blessings, take care. Looking forward to our next conversation. Bye now.